Greetings. Welcome to Speak Nerd and Enter.
Welcome to Speak Nerd and Enter. We guarantee you by the end of this podcast, you will have more knowledge about the Imperium than you ever wanted. I'm Rich.
That sounds like a self-help cassette tape from the 90s.
Right, yeah, I thought this was going to be an exciting intro, and it sounds like I'm in an insurance.
Hold on, here.
I'm Rich.
Hold on, let me
give
give you what I was going to do. Hang on. Let me give you what I was going to do.
To my left on the screen is Mark. Say hi, Mark.
Hi.
Below him is Kelly. And then to the right of Kelly is our fearless leader, Sean, Master of the Imperium.
That's me, yes. And the dog. Whose dog is that?
Somebody's dog. It's not mine.
Yeah, that'll be my dog because, as soon as you start recording, my dogs start barking.
There's my dog. Right there. It's so hard to do when it's backwards.
It is, isn't it? Yeah.
Let's begin.
So, Kelly, you started reading Master of Mankind, right?
Yeah, I'm just about halfway through it.
Oh, okay. So
we're still going to talk about the whole book. So
yeah, that's
sorry,
fine. Yeah,
can't be helped.
All good. It's all good.
I'm not going to stop halfway.
Spoiler alerts just help me get through the book faster.
So, what did you think of it so far? See, this is the big thing. Let me preface this with this. We've talked a bit about the Emperor, and I picture anyone who's got questions about the Imperium, 40K, that sort of thing. I've seen a lot of the information that's out there on the internet and people's own personal ideas and stuff like that. And a lot of it, and I'm saying this as all of us know, we were all employed at Games Workshop. We've all worked there. We've all been in the machine, worked creatively for them. So we have some decent insights into this sort of thing. And a lot of the stuff that's out there, a lot of the suppositions and stuff is not only stupid, but wrong. But anyway,
just
Kelly,
ignorant.
Now, Kelly, you were the one I was really excited to see what you thought of this. And Mark, I actually am very intrigued to see what you think of it as well, because you finished it, right?
I did.
Yeah, I'm intrigued to see what you two think of this. And Kelly, I know you're only halfway done, but as you go through it, to see what you think of it. Okay.
Well, I sent you an email during, because there's so much that's happened in Warhammer 40K since I stopped dealing in it, which was pretty much right around the time that I left the company. I don't think I played a game of 40K since the mid to late 90s. Right. And
they moved it forward. Holy cow.
Yeah, like a lot. And so, I mean, there's enough of what I remember. There's enough knowledge base that I can, kind of just jump right back into figuring some things out. But there were large gaps of things that I didn't know. So getting back into it by reading the book so far, I mean, there's definitely questions. I mean, I think some of my initial thoughts about the Emperor still remain, is that, when do you become the enemy you're fighting against? And I think that reigns true. I think that he also, in some sort of cruel irony, becomes the thing that he didn't want to be in the first place, or maybe he did, but I don't know. It's hard to pin down with him because he's a complex character that seems very black and white on the surface, but when you dig into it, it's so not. I'm sorry, I can't hear you. You're muted.
Sean, you're muted or something. See if we can do the whole podcast with Sean muted like that.
Always problem with audio.
So while he's back, yeah, go ahead. Rich.
So in answer to your question, I also share the same issues with the Emperor, Kelly. I'm torn because the criticisms that I've seen of Master of Mankind in terms of the novel, that it was shallow or that it was disconnected, I think that's by people that don't understand that the Emperor is not, he's not a character that you're not supposed to nail him down. He's not a Space Marine. He's not even a Primarch. He's the Emperor. He's a unique creature in the history of mankind. And his viewpoint, cast over at least 50,000 years, is almost impossible for to encapsulate as one thing, which is why, like you were talking about in the later media that's been put out about the Imperium, the Emperor's soul is shattered. Spoilers: soul is shattered. He's broken into pieces, and he's broken into pieces because his mind is scattered over so many things that he's paying attention to, that he can't be drawn into a singular being. It's a fascinating. It's both psychological, physiological, and moral question as to what the Emperor is. And even going from the beginning of this book, which is in the Master of Mankind, you see, it starts out with two polarities. You've got the incarnation of the first murder, which is apparently Cain and Abel. And you've got the Emperor killing his uncle. Again, spoilers, you're going to get him in this one. Emperor killing his uncle for killing his uncle's brother, which is his father. And he kills him with his mind. He basically gives him a heart attack with his brain. And it just goes to show you that the Emperor is a very super complex character, which it's fascinating as a reader to kind of try and dig into all of the things that he has wrought over the at least 50,000 years that he's been alive.
And I think it's a very difficult character.
Sorry, are you Sean? Are you back?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, good.
I think it's a very difficult character to write for in a story, right? Because nobody's lived that sort of life. You can write a very human story because you have lots of connections to that thing. And I'd be skeptical of any criticism of the book. Now, granted, I start out everything, as you guys will know, I start out very critical of most things, and I'll inject lots of criticism at the beginning, and so I mean that happened here. I mean,
now remember, you are not the ambivalent. That title's already been taken. You're the cynic.
You're the cynic.
No, so I mean, there was a lot of that in the beginning, right? Like with the bit of the first murder, and I'm listening to that, and it was told well. I mean, as far as the story, it was told well. But I'm like, all right, this is very biblical, and oh my God, don't these people just have a complex? They're trying to, but you get past that, and I think some of the stories, or at least the flashbacks that the Emperor has with Ra, if you take those to themselves and sort of just dig into the story, I start asking myself, what is the story asking of me right here? What am I trying to understand from the story at this moment? What does this mean to the character Ra? How does this? Because I think when you get into the Custodes, there's this sort of dogmatic loyalty to the Emperor. The Emperor can do no wrong. If he says, destroy the planet, you just go do it because that's what he said to do. And so I look into the story and I'm trying to understand sort of the relationship between the characters and is this? Here's the thing. I ask myself, is this a manipulation on the part of the? Is this a manipulation on the part of the Emperor to people who are willing to follow him? And it gets back to that idea. Does he become the enemy he's trying to stop anyway? I don't know. There's so much about it that looks on the surface that it could be black and white. But if you look at it as a black and white thing, you're going to miss some very critical elements to who the character is.
Well, even in the second chapter, Ra asks him, did this really happen? Like, he's asking him, did you lie to me?
Right.
Because so the Custodes, as opposed to the Astartes, the Custodes are the closest thing to sons that the Emperor has. And the Emperor views them as his sons, unique genetic creations, which are like art, which is, I believe, close to the quote from the book. The Custodes are, I'm not going to say that the Custodes are removed. So in terms of humanity birthed into the universe, birthed into what the Emperor has purview over. Humanity in general is fodder. It's the baseline, right? So you've got the usable grist of the mill. And then a step above that, you've got the psychers, who are a little more useful. And then above them, you've got the transhuman space marines, who are invested with a portion of the Emperor himself's genetics. Right. And then you have above them the Adeptus, who custodes, who are like unto the true children of the emperor, and then the emperor himself, who's the perpetual. It's interesting to see, like, over the course of an Immortals timeline, they've done an excellent job of encapsulating just the psychology of somebody who has to make decisions on a level of galactic scale based on his own experience. His own experience is so vast to the most venerable of his servants, even to not even Constantine Valdor, even to Malcador the Sigillite, who's also, an ancient like himself. But even Malcador the Sigillite pales in comparison to the Emperor. It's a fascinating story.
But then that fractious element to it, right? Because, getting into the book, you're quickly going to have to delve into sort of the different factions that make up the government that governs the Imperium, right?
The bureaucracy.
Right, exactly. And within that, nobody, I mean, aside from the Emperor, who everybody sort of answers to, there's this element of like, okay, I get what he's trying to do, which is to stabilize humanity and protect people from the the incursions of chaos and things like that. But at the end, it's like individual promises have been made to each faction to be able to bring together sort of this government that really wouldn't work without him at the head, because then nobody answers to any one other thing. So in the end, it's like I'm watching him try to create a thing that at the same time I know is unstable, and just will over time through entropy cease to exist unto itself.
Why did they answer to him? What's the reason why they answered to him? Why do they bow to the Emperor?
Because he'd kill him otherwise.
Yes, because he's the overwhelming force. That's exactly correct. He is the overwhelming force of humanity. Of any human faction, and you see this in the book itself, when he is unleashed, when he is released from the Golden Throne, you see the power that he wields. That is just
that's the part, and I don't want to ruin that for you, Kelly, because that part I thought was the coolest thing in the book. I love the writing and everything, but I'll admit that was just really awesome. That was a really cool part. I would, if any part was going to be, animated, illustrated, filmed, whatever, that would be the part I would want, So I don't want to ruin that for him, but you're right, Rich. It really does. Mark, what did you think of it? Because you finished it, right?
Yeah, I finished it. So I have a lot of disjointed thoughts. I can understand where people I have not read the entire Horus Heresy series, because that's a lot of books. I read the first few, kind of fell off or whatever. I started doing the Siege of Terra, so I got through the first one of that. And so this is kind of going back between all of those. And
you finished
this is
the
41st one. I finished Solar War. So this is the 41st book. So we're well into it. And so like some of the characters that I remember from the first couple of books show up, like that Remembrancer, and I was like, oh, okay, it's cute that they're sticking with that storyline, etc. So, but there was a lot of characters in the book. It's not about the Emperor. The Emperor is barely in it. Like, he's a minor character in this book. So for anybody who has not read Master of Mankind, the 41st novel in the Horus Heresy release,
4 chapters out
of
20.
Yeah, so he's not in all of it, but you've got some of the Adeptus Mechanicus in there. You've got some, the Custodes and the Silent Sisters, and there's a Space Marine in there. The specific guy who what's his deal? Where like his bionics wouldn't stick or whatever. So like I said, I enjoy it. And there was even some random refugees and things like that. So I enjoyed the scope of the book, right? It wasn't about one Space Marine or Gaunt's Ghost running off and doing their thing and we follow the same group of people. It jumped and really lent itself to this big scale, which I liked. And I love what do they call that Eldar city? Forbidden City,
the Impossible City.
The Impossible City, right? Like, that was interesting and evocative there. And the Mechanicum is like, okay, we'll do this that you guys want, but you have to keep the webway open between here and Mars. And they were like, okay, we're gonna take these Titans apart and bring them underground so they can fight in this war, and going back to that demon that was, you know, basically created from the first murder. I like the way they tied that in.
Yes.
Yeah. To where like this
the
demon who's been around since the first murder and is also involved in this battle and what's going on. So like that's a lot of disjointed stuff, but understanding that this novel is not a standalone story with a beginning, middle, end, and it's all wrapped up like a lot of stories are. It's part of a whole. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It really built that 30K feel, setting up the 40K feel, right? Because you guys were talking about the Emperor. The Emperor is trying to, you know, shepherd humanity to this next level of development, right? And he's seen it from the beginning, right? Because he's that old and has seen it. He's like, these fools need to be ruled. And I'm going to do it because no one else is going to be able to do it better. I'm the, you know, not in a look at me, I'm going to go take over, more like a, you know, I need to do this, or these fools are going to wander out into traffic and get run over, kind of thing. So he's doing that.
Mark's
Let me finish, Rich.
Shut
up. I'm talking here. So like he's doing that. That is the point of everything that he's trying to do. And apparently Magnus came in and fucked all that up. So I kind of want to read that story. I enjoyed that aspect of it and whatnot, and we've all heard that Magnus,
which by the way was a very
which one book. Is it which one has the story of Magnus in it?
This one right here, this one, it's very good.
The Raising of Prospero. I might have to go back and check that one out. That got me interested in that.
So the Raising of Prospero is two stories. It's the A Thousand Suns and the Burning of Prospero, but that's what takes place immediately preceding Master of Mankind. The introduction to Master of Mankind is
the culmination.
Raising of Prospero.
The culmination of that. Yeah, so like I enjoyed all of that, and it really gave me this feel of what the Emperor's trying to do. They're throwing all of these things, the scale of the battles, the scale of the war. I really felt that. And setting up how it's all going to go horribly wrong and devolve into 40K, other than what it like could have been had this gone a different way, or had this happened, or had like that is the tragedy of the Emperor and 40K. Is what could have been and wasn't, right? That's I think one of the most evocative things about the Warhammer universe.
So. I think the Webway project was doomed from the beginning, because if you look into how the Webway project was supposed to go, he was going to move all humanity into the Webway to shield them from the forces of the warp. Kind of like the idea, I guarantee you, the guy that came up with the Backrooms YouTube videos, he looked at this and he's like, oh, that's a good idea. I'm going to use this. They were going to basically move all of humanity into a place where they couldn't be touched by the warp. And then the warp was going to starve from not having any humans in the physical universe. But the Webway was corrupted by the warp in the first place. It had holes. They'd get corrupted anyway. So his whole plan, it didn't make any sense to me. It's like, oh, I'm going to move all these.
I don't know, Rich. That sounds suspiciously like blasphemy.
No, it's not blasphemy. Look,
no, it does.
If I was going to be an Inquisitor, I'd be in the Ordo Malleus. All right, but
the Webway. Well, hold on a second. I want to get to Kelly and Mark's thoughts first. Then we'll talk about that.
All right.
So, Kelly, how many discussions have you gotten? How many of the Emperor's discussions with Ra have you gotten through? Do you know? Do you know where the last one was?
Where was that last one? I think the last one was where he killed that one warlord. Like he was revisiting that memory where he killed that warlord in the snow. Right?
Okay. Yeah. Which was great, by the way. See, this is the thing that I think so many people are, when they read. This is what I was talking about the bias people have towards the Emperor, because they love to sit there and try to pick, well, he's stupid, he should have done this, and that doesn't make sense, and he's this and that and all that stuff. But as you said, and Mark actually brought it very aptly, you could look at these stories, you could look at that character as very black and white, you can look at them from a very two-dimensional perspective. But if you allow yourself to look at it as an incredibly long, overarching story that still hasn't had the end given
story.
Yeah. And trying to empathize with that character, to understand from a kid, which is what he's trying to show Ra. He's showing Ra the arc of his life as, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing. This
Right.
is what I'm hoping to do. And hopefully when you know this, you'll fight even harder, right? When you look at those stories, he starts off as the kid, and you can see as he's going through this how he learns more and more and more. He didn't know it all at once. He learned more and more and more until at the end with the epilogue where he has quite a massive revelation, I would say. Really, I thought very beautifully done. And that one that you're at now, Kelly, where he was talking about faith, I thought that was so well done. And as a person who's religious and all, obviously it's disconnected from the universe I know, but I thought for this universe, for this story, it was so well done, so well explored, and how he had Ra looking at him and seeing what faith wrought, and how it could be used and all that. And as you're reading the story, you can kind of see the parallels between what he's warning about with this guy and what he's doing and what he could become, right?
Oh yeah, because you see that in like the relationship or in the dialogue of Diocletian with others, and this is what I'm talking about. His adherence, just fanatical adherence to whatever the emperor says, is like unto these other things, and so that's why again I think the line between hero and villain is so thin, and you can easily cross from one side to the other, and it's entirely perspective at the end of the day. One person's hero is another person's villain. The history books are written by the victors, so that's how that goes.
Well, the very smart choice on the writer was to use the custodes as the sort of the narrators for how the emperor speaks to them and how it speaks to the reader, because the custodes, being the first true sons of the emperor, have an insight that is not available to the Astartes. You even see it in the book.
Yes, we do.
Through the hammer, like the hammer can't tell the story of the hand that wields it, but the custodes are on a more equitable level with the emperor than any of the Astartes have. Even the
and I think that's because that's why they're so close to him. Mm-hmm. You can see you were talking about the various arms and parts of the Imperium and so forth.
Yeah, his Praetorian Guard.
Yeah, well, they are, yeah. But you can see how he made them to be able to see him the way that they do.
Yeah.
They even address it, as you said, towards the end of the book, how they, everybody else talks about this and this that they see, and they consider it doggerel. All what they see is very different from what everybody else sees, except the Silent Sisters.
Yes.
And the Silent Sisters
and the work at all. They see him as a man.
Right. And so those two are the closest to him, which is also, I thought, very interesting. Neither of them is a psychic entity, right? But actually kind of the opposite of, where they talk about the custodes being so well made that Demon Drachnyan saying it would take until the stars burned out before he'd be able to, finally overcome that mind, right? Yep. And then the Silent Sisters, who are just untouchable by him anyway, to the point where
they're nulls in the work. They drain him of ability by trying to look at them.
Yeah, and I thought they did an excellent job for the writer of letting us get inside the Emperor's head via these flashbacks that he's showing to some of the custodes. Like that was very well done. At first, I did the audiobook version, which has an amazing narrator. He did such a good job.
Same.
And the book that I'm followed it up with has nothing to do with any of this. It's some modern book or whatever that I'm reading, and it's terrible compared to what I just read. And like the narrator his voice is fine, but his cadence is off, and it's weird. And so it's amazing coming from this narration to one that is not as well done, not as polished, and really being able to tell the difference. And even the author's word choice and some of the like there was one phrase in there where he was like, it was like war given form and set against the backdrop of the stars, talking about this big ship. And that could have been the Solar War, but one of those, I was like, wow, this guy's writing, right? And a lot of times you don't really think of, Games Workshop, Warhammer 40K novels as being, deftly written. It's more about the story in the sandbox than how good the author is. But so far, the last couple that I've read, man, they're bringing their A game. These are very well written novels, and I know because the one I'm reading now is not as well written at all. I'm plugging through it because I'm like, okay, but whatever. And I'm like, can't wait to jump back into some of these. They're so good. And before I let you jump in, Rich, I also really love the Demons take on the Silent Sisters. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you're getting,
I don't like them.
you know, they're I don't like these, and you know, like even when they kill them and destroy them, there's no pleasure there because it's you know, it's not like they're feasting on a human soul.
They give nothing.
Right.
Yeah.
Empty calories, just like my soda.
So I'm excited to see how you as you progress through the book, Kelly, what you think of it as that story arc continues and then finally comes to its close, because I thought it was a very good ending as well. Aaron Dembski-Bowden, who's the author of this, I think does all his books that I've read have been really well done. Really well done. And I love how he not just writes for the character, he writes giving you information on that character in a very nice, concise, but attaching way, I suppose. So that girl who's on the planet, who's being taken on the black ship, remember, you know, who's just kind of like a side character in there. You know what she's going for. You know what's going to happen. But right.
No, they're going to train them to be psychers.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
or navigators rather. They're all going to be navigators. Trust me.
Be a battery.
They're going to be astropaths. Yeah, but I loved that story. I loved how it was written, and it's one of those things that, as you mentioned, Rich, it's something that's cruel on the face of it to the extreme, to the point where even the Silent Sister is sitting there saying, "Are we really doing this? You know, this is kind of crazy that we're doing this, you know." But you understand why, and you see you see the cost of it, and in a weird way, I find it weird that people would say it seems the story seems, what did you say, distant or detached? You'd heard criticisms like that or something like that.
Yeah, I've heard some critics say that the story is disparate, that it's broken, that they want it to be more concise in terms of, you know, well, why don't we talk about the Emperor's character? And I said,
that's
I see it. I was reading and I started to have to look at it as each individual story is just like a vignette of a thing rather than the entirety of a saga, right? You're just getting snapshots in time of this overarching thing. Because, you know, the want initially was to think like it's any other story, like I've got a beginning, a middle, and an end, but it wasn't that. It was like I'm here and then I'm jumping over here and then I'm jumping over here, and the relationship between all of these things is sometimes an unknown entity. So it was better for me if I just look at each individual chapter or story within a chapter as just its own self-contained thing.
Yeah. You know what I just thought of what it kind of reminds me of? It's kind of like if you had Dr. Manhattan decide, you know what, you're right, I am going to save humanity.
Manhattan, good choice.
Yeah, here we go. This is what I'm going to do. And he sees everything all at once, right? Now, Dr. Manhattan has the benefit of not having the vagaries of his foresight that the Emperor has.
Yeah.
But kind of the same thing, right? So, like you said, Kelly, it's not just he's seeing all these things at once. The things that are going to be, or possibly going to be, the things that are, and the things that were, and seeing them all at once. And how long has he been doing that, right? And I love that talk. I don't think you've gotten to it yet, where he talks to Ra about foresight. And
it's pretty miserable. It's a miserable thing to have.
Yeah, and I loved how the author, Aaron Dembski-Bowden talked about that and described it, and had Ra, who was playing the part of every skeptic who's ever been out there. Well, if the Emperor knows all this, why is he, you know, such a jerk and all this stuff? And he sits there and has Ra try to climb a mountain. Well, there's a mountain. Go ahead, give it a climb, you know, and gives him that lesson in foresight that I thought was very, very well done. And if you allow yourself to empathize with the Emperor, you can understand why he's having the issues he does. And especially if you consider the enemies he's going up against, when you're dealing with the Chaos Gods who are in the same boat as the Emperor, they're not all powerful, all knowing, omniscient, and all that. They still have gaps in their own, foresight, but they've been around longer than him. And so they have the benefit of that, the safety of where they are, the safety of being able to be wrong and just simply do it again. Because they know that life, wherever it is going to end up feeding them anyway at some point, right? So I think the book for me, I was so glad when I read that book that it was done the way that it was. Because you're right, Mark, it could have been very different. And Kelly, you're right about that too. It could have been very tropish, could have been very banal, very vanilla. And instead it wasn't. He took it a very different route. That's my favorite book that I've read of the entire Horus Heresy, of actually probably of all the 40K novels that I've read. That's probably my favorite because it tackled such a huge character in a way that was really well done. I've heard or I've read books where they have like Catan, actual Catan, and Catan shards and stuff like that. And it's not that it's bad, but it's not as nuanced as this. And when you think of an eternal being, you kind of have to figure time's going to be very different for that as it is for us. And so trying to have that conversation, trying to relay information from one to the other is going to be on a different level. It's going to be very, very difficult.
Yeah, so that's where I think it's really ultimately difficult to write for a character like the Emperor, or write for any of those entities that existed in the universe for ages. It's like you don't have you can think up a character, but you have no concept of how to write for that character because you have no relationship to what any of those dynamics mean at the end of the day. I mean, how long the Emperor's been around, everything he's seen, everything he's experienced. You can't. That's the limitation as an author. I think some things in that realm are better left unwritten. Just let the mind just sort of wash over it a little bit and think about whatever you want to think about it. But you can never truly understand it because it's too far outside the realm of possibility and understanding. Here,
yeah, but I think they did such a good job in this book of conveying how old the Emperor is. I didn't go into this book thinking about that, but then you're like, he was around when Cain and Abel were stabbing each other, and he was around when, like for all of it. And you don't really think of that. We always think about the Golden Throne and 30K and 40K, but there was 30,000 years of history that he lived, right? He was there to see it all. And the author did a good job of giving us glimpses of what it would be like to be that old. It was well done.
With such a big canvas, to be able to treat that the way he did was excellent. I agree.
Yeah.
Have you gotten to the part with Arkin Land, who's one of the characters in the book? Have you gotten to the part where Arkin Land meets the Emperor?
No. Wait.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Because I can't remember
where he's doing his surgical thing, whatnot. Yeah.
With Angron.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I thought that was really well done. That was his explanation for the Primarchs and what they were, and I thought that was really well done. But again, you have to ask yourself, how much of that was how Arkin Land was processing what the Emperor was trying to get across, and how he visualized it, how he heard it, and all of that, and how much of that was what the Emperor actually thought? Because there's a few times in the book where he just refers to the Primarchs by their number rather than the name, but there are a couple times he brings the names up, and you wonder how, for a being like the Emperor who is so long-lived, how attached is he going to be, and on what level, to each and every person that he has to deal with.
Well, that did bring about an interesting thought in my head as I started to think about the Primarchs, and I've wrestled with this one now for a couple of days trying to sort it out, is that I've started to see the Primarchs sort of like Frankenstein's monster. Right? Sort of this, I created this thing because I could, and that it didn't ask to be in existence. And you start to see the Primarchs, you see the flaws within the Primarchs, and you're like, well, this is totally Frankenstein's monster, just on a much larger scale. and they become. I mean, at what point? And it seems like they do, for the purposes of the Horus Heresy, become a hindrance to what he wanted to do anyway, because they were ultimately, some of them, corrupted by chaos.
Right.
Yeah. So I mean, the Primarchs are what they are, but yeah, I see them now more as constructs. You know, like Frankenstein's monster referred to Frankenstein as father. You know, I mean, there was that sort of a relationship from one side, but Dr. Frankenstein didn't see it that way. You know, he
yeah,
sort of,
but the Emperor does understand that's how they saw it. He does
Right.
understand that, and that's why he explained what, you know, the whole Pinocchio thing, right? But people who then, like, you know, you talk about, well, he's a horrible father and all that stuff. Well, he never looked at him as a father, you know, really. That wasn't the intent.
Yeah.
The war,
They were a means to an end.
chaos, they were supposed to be. Chaos, of course, and this has to do with later in the book with his revelation, his growth as the Emperor and all that. But later on in the book, he talks about that. But chaos is learning too. And chaos isn't just going to sit by idle while this stuff is happening. If you're doing that stuff and you're my enemy, okay, I'm going to go and try to screw up your project.
Mm-hmm.
Takes them and kind of stepfathers them into the abused child, you know, slot where they can. And that then kind of throws a big wrench in what the Emperor had for his plan. So you just scrap it, or do you keep going and hoping for the best and trying to do what you can with what you got, you know?
Yeah.
And I love the fact that he's addressing, or he did address all of that stuff. I thought it was very well done. I thought it was really well done.
I think my favorite character in the book so far is Zeph the Blood Angel.
Yes,
you know, there's just so much about that character that I enjoyed getting to know more about.
Zephon, the bringer of sorrow.
Yeah.
I liked his character a lot. Yeah, he actually plays. He's not just in this one. He actually is in other books as well.
Okay.
And plays a part all the way up through. He was in the last book I read, which was Echoes of Eternity or Gates of Eternity. I forget what it was, but the last one they had come out with Sanguinius and all that. He was in there too.
Right. So I have two things to say. Number one, if the Emperor, if you look at him as a father, Child Protective Services would definitely have taken all of the Primarchs away.
It's Erda's fault.
And rightfully so. And secondly, after reading the book, I almost want to start an Adeptus Mechanicus army. I really enjoyed kind of the insight into the Adeptus Mechanicus, and because a lot of their stuff is in this book and whatnot, from Arkham Land to all the servitors that they had defending the city and whatnot. Like it was
they
really
had the
well
best line in the book
fleshed out. Which was
they had the best line was what was it? It was cease your attempts at humor when the Mechanicum general is down there trying to, you know, talking to that other one that he needs her for this experiment thing, and then he tells Arkenland to, you know, cease your attempts at humor. I thought that was just perfect.
Rich, your sound is not working well. I can't.
You know whose character?
I have trouble hearing Rich speak in full sentences, so I think something's up with your audio there, Rich.
You know, Mark, you're talking about the Mechanicus. Those dudes are jerks.
They really are.
Yeah.
All right.
Now Sean's gone silent. I don't hear Sean right now.
Yeah, we can hear Rich, but not Sean.
Nope, can't hear you, Sean.
I'm not Sean. I'm Rich.
I know. We can hear your dogs too.
Yeah, my dogs are a pain in the ass. I cannot help that. But hold on. All right.
We seem to be experiencing some technical difficulties.
Yes. Sean's going. So as far as the Mechanicum go, the Mechanicum are slaved to the Necrons. So the Necrons are the root of the Mechanicum. They have everything the Mechanicum does spawns from the Necron.
No, it doesn't spawn from the Necrons. It spawns from the Catan.
Okay, well, the Catan are the corruption of the Necrons.
That's true. That's true. But I just want to make sure that that's, you know, because it is a nuanced thing.
Yeah.
The Mechanicum is actually the result of the kind of indirectly, not on purpose, but indirectly, because the Catan wouldn't care if they showed up on Earth and the, you know, Earthlings started, oh, you're gods and we love your machines, and he'd eaten them. But it was happenstance, and how it happened is actually pretty cool. That was the Emperor who had a very direct hand in that too.
Yep.
And I don't know how much of that was planned, but it was pretty cool. And one of the Catan is actually the reason for the Mechanicum.
Yes, the dragon.
Yeah, the Void Dragon. But my favorite character, by the way, out of the book, or my favorite line was from the Custodes Diocletian. Have you gotten to the part where they get the what is her name? The Jaya, Baroness Jaya. They get her out of prison, right?
Yeah.
And she thinks she's going to die, and then, you know, she's getting ready to do her attack thing. She's finally made some, you know, some shivs out of the aluminum cans she has and all. And she sees that golden armor on the other side, and he says, "Stand back," and slams the, you know, his spear through there and opens the door. And she says, "If you're going to execute me, then I want to have a, you know, a clean uniform at least beforehand." I love his response to that. It was very civilized, and I'm sure one day you'll get there. It was just like so dismissive and just, you know.
Yeah, and I like that whole story, right? Because that's one of those ones. I don't know that that character's ever been in any of the other books that I've read, but like, I guess she's head of one of these households that has, you know, knights and titans and whatnot, and you know, the heresy's going on, and they're like, wait a second, this doesn't seem right. And so her and her entourage are like, you guys go back home, we're gonna go to Earth, and like, you know, we were witnessed and or were part of war crimes, you know, blue on blue kind of thing. And so they come back to Earth, and they're like, yep, right into jail with you. And so like they're like do, you know, and they almost starve to death because of like an oversight. And then they're like, oh man, we need some pilots. Wait a second, we got some pilots. We threw in the clink, and they drag them out, and basically they're like, yeah, we did this, and we understand our life might be forfeit, but we serve the emperor. And they were like, cool, sorry about your house, it's been destroyed, but we're gonna get you some other knights, and you can go, you know, defend this impossible city. And like that whole thing was just so well done, of like the sheer callousness and the scale of death of this war. You know, that it's not being fought efficiently. It is literally, we're going to clog their barrels with as many bodies as we can throw at them. It kind
of shows. The other thing that gave me a sense for was, if you're the emperor and you're looking at mankind, you get that revelation when you're a kid, right? And you're looking at mankind, you see this sort of thing going on ad infinitum, right? All across humanity, all across where it's going to spread and all of that. Wouldn't you sit there and think, oh my goodness, we're doomed. I gotta put a hand on this wheel. There's too much crap going on. You know, yes, there's going to be quadrillions who die, you know, and all that, but good Lord, if I don't do something, it's going to be just ridiculous. So it gave me a sense for how difficult it is for him to run the whole thing, and how he's probably sitting there saying, okay, all right, there's going to be a lot of this stuff going on. I got to hit the high points. These are the high points. I know these people are going to die, so I can't worry over much about them. And it kind of gives him that, you know, that distancing kind of thing, where he now has to look at humanity as his significant other, as his, you know, his child he has to care for, rather than the individuals. But I did love his part where he was talking to Ra and saying, you notice, I will give the lives of my legions, of my citizens, of my subjects, all that stuff, I'll give them freely. But you notice I'm miserly with your lives, you know? And that's what I was talking about when I was telling you that's what makes the Custodes so different for me, is that the Emperor put so much effort, so much care into them. You were talking about Frankenstein's monster with the other ones, right? These ones were like you said, his personal artistry, where they are never going to turn, never, and the Primarchs didn't have that. He didn't even make them with that kind of care, and that led to I forget which other book it was where they were talking about that. I've read so many now with the Custodes and all that, where it talks about him actually going to incredible lengths to get each one of the ones that he used for the Custodes. That wasn't happenstance. It wasn't chance. It wasn't like on, the Marines do, where they go to a planet and if you survive, okay, you're in, wasn't that. These ones were specifically chosen by him, where he fought entire wars to get that one person to turn them into a Custodes. Apparently it was a massive, massive effort to get Constantin Valdor. And there was a specific reason he got him. And so just the lore that goes into that and the depth that they gave it, I thought was very well done with that too. And there's a lot of that continuing nuance in that story that as you go on, especially in the one you're reading or you want to read, Mark, about the burning of Prospero, about Magnus, there's a lot of it in there too.
Great story. They have an amazing story, and the whole psychology between Magnus and why things are going on and why Ahriman decides that he should take the 4 as opposed to Magnus kind of sitting back. It's incredible.
Another one of those Frankenstein's monster things, by the way. And I loved how they wrote for that. The scene with Magnus actually showing up. The book before where, Prospero burns and all that, great book. And then that scene in the Emperor's throne room where Magnus actually shows up and you have this huge description, this very cinematic scene playing out in your head just for those 2 words, where one says father and the other one says Magnus. And that's it. And all the crap that comes from that, that was, I thought, so well done. Because Magnus's story, back before the Horus Heresy was explored, back when it was just a idea so that Marines could fight Marines, back then, Magnus's story seemed like, well, that's kind of jackassery. Why would you, bum rush him for giving you warning? Sounds like he was trying to do what you would have wanted a dutiful son to do. But the way they fleshed this out for something that was really kind of a not well thought out part of the lore, the way they've turned that into something so tragic and so well thought out now, I thought was really well done too. This whole bit with the Horus Heresy has been just really nice.
But it is the thing that I will fault the Emperor for on a very large level.
How dare you?
Is that he's
so many heretics on this podcast.
He's so willing to expend so much in this. Is that these other creations don't see themselves as an expendable item?
Yeah.
And he's just indifference to it.
It's not that he's an indifference to it. Remember, when he had that. Again, you have to look at it kind of like Dr. Manhattan, right? When Dr. Manhattan was talking to, what was his wife's name? Silk Spectre. When he was talking to her any number of times on Mars, on Earth, and all that, he's going through the motions because he knows he has to. And she's thinking of it as, you don't care. She's getting pissed at him because there's no emotion. She's throwing crap, throwing a fit and all that because there's no emotion and everything. And finally, what's that?
My ovaries.
Yeah. And then finally he, but it doesn't change his actual feelings towards her. It doesn't. He just feels like he has to go through this, but he already knows how it's going to end up. But I have to go through all this pain first. Well, how excited are you going to be as you're going through it, as you're going through all that stuff? And for the Emperor, putting all this effort into those Primarchs and trying to get this, off the ground. And you got these grand plans, and you're trying your best to shepherd humanity into this new future. And now they take them and screw them up, and you're like, oh, all right, here we go. And now I'm seeing the future and what it's going to be, and just how awful it is. And
the problem is that he built the Primarchs to a standard humanity, baseline humanity, as these demigods, but at the end of the day, they were hammers for nails. They were very tools for the end of his design, which he did not care about. It's like, well, I broke this hammer. Okay, I'm gonna throw that away.
Well, but that's unfair to say, though, because think about it this way. You had an idea as to how it was going to play out, and someone came and kidnapped them and kept them for years and years and years and changed them fundamentally.
Yeah.
And then you got them back, probably because they wanted you to. Probably because they wanted you to have them back. Here you go. I screwed them up. Go ahead. Take them back. And so all he has left now is this thing he put so much effort into that's now going to be a real problem, but he can't get rid of them. He can't do that. He's got to try, right? I think it actually shows a great deal of compassion on his part, because he could have just hunted him down and killed him, but he didn't. He didn't.
Part of the... Don't argue with that part of the narrative. What I would say that there needs to be a recognition of what's being dealt with. There's a very base inclination to look at the Primarchs as like, well, these are the Balwarks, the Crusaders of humanity. They're not. They're not that at all. Each one is a section of what is capable of humanity, but they're not subservient to any portion of humanity at all. They're subservient to the will of the Emperor. Humanity is a secondary consideration of all of their ability.
Individual humans.
Yeah,
individual humans are.
All the Astartes are a reflection of that. They're no longer a humanity. They're an aid of the Emperor's will, which might not be what the standard baseline human might want for their whole life.
Right, but that's the point. But that was the point, and that's the tragedy of it, is that the Emperor sees what the individual wants and desires of humanity would lead to, which is the same crap that the Eldar fell to. And so he can't concern himself with that. He has to concern himself with the end goal, which is trying to save them. I didn't get any of this from the book
we just read.
Yes, you did.
I don't know what you guys are talking about right
now. Master of Mankind, literally the title encapsulates all of what it's the Master of Mankind. It's not the Master of Mark. It's not the Master of Sean. It's not the Master of Kelly. It's the Master of Mankind, which is the encapsulation of an entire race of beings, how we can move them to survival. It's not even to bring them to some form of dominance or some form of next level. It's to allow them to exist beyond where they are right now.
And that's kind of how he described the plan, was first we have to be able to survive. First we have to be able to become something that we're becoming now.
Vision of the universe.
Kind of, yeah. But you can understand what he's saying. We got to get here first. Then once we're there, then the shepherding thing can happen and all of that. But until then, we got to worry about that final goal, Yeah. And so that necessitates him being cruel. Now, you can understand why humans don't like that. You can understand why he feels like that. And you can understand well, but
I'm on the mill and I'm being ground to dust, I'm like, this sucks.
Yeah, absolutely. But that's the point of the 40K universe, is that's That's the suck of it all, right? You know,
Yep.
that's the horror of it. And you're not getting a better deal from the Chaos Gods. That's for sure.
No,
You can get a better deal from the
they're a
Eldar.
bad choice.
the
Yeah.
Eldar.
I don't know. Some of that
Yeah.
Slanesh stuff seems like it might be a good way to go.
Yeah, for about
Yeah.
5 minutes, and then
till he shows up with the bladed strap on, then everything gets the Eldar are having a going out of business sale. That's what's happening with them.
it's like
But
you don't care, we don't care either. But we
Yeah,
don't-
see, and this is why I play Necrons. They're like, I ain't got. I'm just gonna go sleep.
Well, see, that's
I'm
the thing.
like,
Kelly, you asked about the Necrons, and I want to
Yeah.
touch on that because
Yeah, I
that
asked about a number of the races because I've got questions.
yeah, the Necrons to me are the tragedy of the revamping of the lore of 40K. I know why they did it, and you guys know what I'm talking about. I liked them before they made them into essentially just fighting pharaohs. You know,
Space
they're all
Egyptians.
they're all fighting against
Space
each other.
Egyptians. I mean, they're Tomb Kings in 40K, is what they.
That's what it is. Yeah, they're
But-
human.
Yeah, yeah.
You know,
But in position of that, I like the fact that there's a tragic story in their. They sacrifice their individuality to survive into the next millennium.
I liked it when that was the story. They didn't sacrifice that individuality anymore. Now, like I said, it's a bunch of individual kings and all that crap who are essentially fighting each other. I liked it before when they didn't talk to anybody. You couldn't negotiate with them. If they showed up, they were just eradicating it, right? If you were alive, you were dead. That was it. Nothing else.
Yeah. You
Oh,
were
so it's changed from
unclean.
what I initially read then.
It
Because
has.
getting into the book, you know, I went back, I went onto YouTube and I looked at, okay, I want to understand sort of timelines and dates, you know, just major occurrences. And so, yeah, I mean, the first one that I looked at that brought up Necrons, as far as I was concerned, the Necrons were just like this singular race. You know, there's one king, I forget the name anyhow, but anyhow, they all went to sleep when everything went to hell. And then they were going to come back out. And that, so yeah, I mean, I kind of left it at this world of like, okay, the Necrons are a cohesive unit, but if you're presenting it as like now there's a bunch of individual kings and doing their own
unique. They're
right,
not.
but well, here's the thing. Like, I'm with Sean. I kind of liked it the old way, but having said that, I understand, you know, what they're doing with the new one, because with all of these armies, like, oh, I'm going to play Space Marines, but I want to play this chapter. I want to play that chapter. I want to play this chapter, right? So you can play different aspects of you know, the Eldar, and even in like, what is it? There's sub factions. So you're playing Necrons or you're playing Marines, but no, these are Imperial Fists or these are, you know, Blood Angels. They wanted to do that for Necrons as well, and so now you have these different dynasties, and they have certain things that, you know, in game terms, it's like, oh, this dynasty is, you know, using these type of tactics, and that dynasty is using different types of tactics. Or you can create your own dynasty and like pick one from column A and one from column B and kind of create your own, you know, fighting style. So like, I get what they're doing, and as far as the revamp goes, I do like it. You know what I'm saying? I get it. If you're gonna revamp the whole thing and make a sci-fi version of Tomb Kings, they did a really good job of creating a sci-fi version of Tomb Kings. So like, I enjoy it for what it is. I'm with you with the kind of the retcon, because I've been playing Necrons for over 20 years now.
Yeah.
You know, but I also do see where they're going. Two of the last novels I read were the Silent King and whatnot. Or that wasn't what it was called, but they were Necron-centric novels. I'm drawing a blank on their name.
The Twice Dead King.
But I am enjoying, yeah, the Twice Dead King or something, I think is what it was.
Yeah.
And the follow-on. You know, like, I enjoy it. You know, they're like, okay, we gave up our flesh bodies in service to the Catan, and then they kind of felt duped and they overthrew the Catan, and now they've bound some of the shards, whereas back in the old day it was like, nope, that's the Catan, right? You got the Nightbringer. I remember everybody was so afraid of the Nightbringer, you know, and you put that model on the table, they're like, ah. So I did enjoy that. So, but you know.
Well, see, the lore was so much cooler back then, because you did have essentially a chaos god, but in the material realm. right?
Mhm.
And they had come back and were starting to wake up, and it was kind of cool, the, you know, that dynamic. And they even had some really cool books with that, where they wouldn't talk, they wouldn't panic, there wasn't any, you know, political intrigue or any of that.
Yeah.
It was just, man, they showed up and they rolled over everybody,
Well,
right?
that was part of how I got into playing them. Like, I was getting lazy. Like, with Space Marines, you could pick all these special weapons and sergeants and hey, give them all this stuff. And it was like Necrons, you had troops.
Yeah.
And that was it. Like, you weren't giving them any special weapons. You were just like, you want some troops, you want some scarabs, you want, I think, the destroyers. And like, that was about it. And so, like, part of me was like, oh, I'm tired of all these like super special, crazy, all this war gear. And I was like, I'm going to, you know, pick a new army. And I did Necrons because they were so straight up and down. Like, here's some undead dudes. And you're right. They never had to roll like panic tests. You know, they had the we'll be back rule. And they were just like tough as Marines with the we'll be back roll, and there wasn't all this other wacky special stuff. And there's been a lot of war gear creep and a lot of special unit creep and whatnot. And some of it is very cool and evocative, and I like it. But it's different from, like I say, where it started.
And it never
but on the
made
whole,
sense.
I like it.
And it never made sense to me. Well, how did the Necrons turn around and shatter the Catan? How did that happen? What's going on with that? Here you have these beings who are so all powerful that the, you know, Necrons essentially woke them up and brought them into the material, or excuse me, awareness of the minutia of the material realm, and gave them all this technology to be able to overcome their severe mortality, to give them what they were looking for, and in turn they ate their souls and all of that. How do you turn around and destroy the Catan? Because the Catan, they rule the laws of physics. You know, they were godlings. They could destroy entire solar systems, create, you know, black holes, and do all kinds of wacky stuff that I'm sitting there wondering, okay, so how did they get outmatched by their by their lowly?
It's easy because
by the IP holder.
They're brittle. No, they're brittle, and so
they're brittle.
The Necrons were like, "Oh my God, look over there!" And they're like, "What?" And then they hit them with a hammer, and then you had all the shards, and we're like, "We'll just pick these up and not put them together." Problem solved.
Yeah. I will say this, that I see a little bit of the creep of the old Catan coming back in though, because it's too much of a missed opportunity, and it's too cool to explore that, to not have that happen. Like Belisarius Cawl, the one who created the Primaris. There's a book with him where he goes, you'd like this book, as a matter of fact, Mark, because it's about the size of the Emperor and after their fall and the surviving ones and going back and all. And they discover a Catan shard. And it's a fairly large one that's self-aware. So it's not, you know, not the usual one that they have. This is one that's closer to a actual Catan. Not there, but closer, right? And he actually gives them insight to the Eldar, humans, and the Emperor. He talks about, or the Mechanicum, the human race, and the Emperor. And he tells them what each of them are. He says, you know, the human race has gone far afield from what the old ones intended for them, and that the Mechanicum is a lie and the Emperor is a weapon. And it was a really cool bit that they wrote with this Catan talking about it. And that part was really cool. And that's the kind of thing that I really miss with that. We used to have talks with like the Deceiver and, you know, that kind of thing. And anyway, but yeah, Kelly, they changed that quite a bit. They changed that quite a lot. The Eldar is still the same. The Webway, as a matter of fact, was not their creation. The old ones made that. The old ones made the Webway. And it's conceivable. There's a lot of theories about it and that sort of thing. And I kind of understand this, that the Emperor may have been their idea, that when they created mankind, that was the idea, is that eventually they would make this being called the Emperor, who could be a weapon against, you know, chaos and, you know, all that stuff.
And it's working.
Yeah, beautifully. And so but yeah, the Eldar are pretty much the same. I do like a lot of the Eldar stuff that they've put into the Horus Heresy books. There's a lot of Eldar mischief going on and that sort of thing. Eldred,
Eldred Uthlin.
thank you. He's got a lot to do in this stuff. And the Dark Eldar do, even to this point, they are a big deal. But I always liked the Eldar. I always liked them, and I like their history. I like their lore. I wonder how. I always wondered how the creation of the Eldar gods came about. Because if the Eldar were created by the old ones, was that a manifestation in the warp of them? Because that's how Slaanesh was made. Was that a nobler version of them? Or I always wondered how that happened. But anyway, what was the other ones you were asking about?
Oh, I wanted something to read about the Tyranids because I still find them fascinating.
The
I just don't know
Tyranids,
if there's any good books about that.
Thank goodness they haven't changed the Tyranids. The Tyranids still, if they show up, they're not talking to you. They're just eating. That's it.
Yep.
So thank goodness they still have something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I find that for humans, when we try to write for alien races, it becomes very one note kind of thing, because all we can write about is, all we can relate to is what we think about. And so everything else ends up sounding kind of human, right?
Right.
The Tyranids you're able to do that because they're just predators. They just show up and eat everything. So you don't have to worry about all the machinations and politics and all that stuff. And I like the idea of this force that is just so laser focused. That's what makes them so terrifying, is when they show up, it is everybody eyes on you and they are going balls to the wall.
Yeah, and in conjunction with that, like, I also like the Gene Stealer cult army. I have one of those, and I kind of like that it's this, vanguard for the real Tyranid race, but it's like this cancer that grows within the society, and when they're ready for, when they're ripe to be eaten, that they're going to send this kind of beacon that will attract, the mothership to come over there and smorgasbords on. But in the meantime, you've got like this kind of, it's almost like a chaos cult infection, but it's a Xenos cult. And so I kind of like both, but I want to play a lot of Gene Stealers in my cult. Because
by the way, Hammer and Bolter had a episode on Warhammer Plus about Gene Stealer cult. It was pretty cool, actually. I did like it.
Okay.
Where you're following this family. The Tyranids are invading this planet, and this family's trying to get out, and they've got some, connection with a relative who's working with the shuttles that are getting all the rich people off. And they're getting, as they're getting to the shuttle, the Tyranids are coming down, eating people and all this, and they're barely making it through. They finally get on the shuttle, and then you discover that it was actually Gene Stealer family that, hybrids. Yeah. So it was kind of cool that they were escaping the Tyranid invasion, essentially to go infect another planet, and we're not under the imperative from the hive mind to stay, but almost like left alone so they could go and spread the disease somewhere else. I thought that was pretty cool. So
yeah. So no,
I mean, have you guys seen that trailer for the Space Marine 2 video game where the Space Marines are fighting the Tyranids and whatnot? I'm looking forward to that.
I'm not
sorry, Kelly, I cut you off.
No, I'm just looking to bridge the gap from where I stepped away from the game to say, okay, let me get a little bit more up to speed. But my interest is not so much in Space Marines and sort of a lot of their lore, because I don't know. I mean, there's part of me that says, Space Marines have been done to death. I want to dig into some other things, and I really like things that deal with the obscure, the things there where the sort of the universe hasn't been explored enough. The Tyranid are fascinating from that idea that you're, as you said, Sean, they don't talk. They're just coming in there. They're wiping out a planet, a landscape, and just absorbing everything. But I find that fascinating from it's such a fascinating story mechanism to say, okay, here we're going to tell the story from the person who experienced the onslaught,
Mhm.
and maybe all you have are some files that are left behind or something like that. And I think that that's very interesting, or other aspects of the 40K universe that haven't been explored very much. And I'm just, if there's recommendations on books to get into after this one that deal with that, that would be good. But I don't want to read it just to read it. So if it's a crap book, I'm not interested.
Right. Well, at this point, I think we bored Rich to death. I think.
Oh, is
I literally
Rich?
I think he just fell asleep.
Rich.
Jesus Christ.
You okay, Rich?
You
Yeah,
okay?
What's up?
You know,
This
I'm. How bad is it when our podcast is putting members to sleep, not just listeners?
Well, you guys are all going on off your own ongoing conversations. I'm just listening in.
The let's see, what else has changed? I don't think anything else has really changed, man. All the other stuff is pretty much the same. You were there when the Tau came out.
Yep.
So that as far as
that was basically the last like new race that really hit. I mean, now we got Leagues of Phaeton, but that's not new as much as like a reshaping of the
Leagues
squats.
of Phaeton, a reshaping of the squats, but the Tau were an independent creation.
Rich, all I see is your mouth.
I know.
How's that? The Tau were
disembodied mouth and beard.
I know.
I'm a creation of my own means. So the Tower.
Yeah, I think 40K needs more races for some reason. I think that they should put more in the thing.
So, Rich, let me ask you then: do you have a more nuanced view of the Emperor now? Do you think?
Yes and no. I mean, it's.
Do you see where you were wrong? Just so deeply wrong?
No.
Have you come to repent of your heresy?
I think you're looking at it from the viewpoint of someone who would judge him from a particular point in time. The Emperor is a creation of his entire existence, and to try and encapsulate. So when you're sitting at era, Indomitus, when you're in the 41st millennium, and he's like, well, the Emperor, he's this thing at this point in time. And then you have creatures which are coming at you from the year 20,000 or 30,000 and say, he's not what you think he is. The argument that is in play, the people that have known him for 20,000 years and the people that know him from the time of their birth to say 100 years it's not equitable. You can't equate those two. It's like Abaddon's vision of the Emperor compared to an Inquisitor who was born 100 years before the story that you're telling. They're not an equitable comparison. It's like, well, you don't know what happened this whole time. You were just born, and then you came in. You were indoctrinated into this idea of what you're talking about, and now who's lived it for 30,000 years. I don't see the argument. I can't see that there is an argument. I see that there's a gap that is not bridgeable by any sort of experience. Do you guys follow what I'm saying?
No. However,
not even a little bit. I tuned out.
No, I get what you're saying.
That should have made sense to anybody who's following our entire conversation.
But
like, Abaddon is known the Emperor for 30,000 years.
And by the way, Abaddon has that demon in his sword.
He does.
Yes.
Oh yeah, the demon from the
exactly.
Pulled it out, pulled
Yeah.
the sword out of him, and said, "Rock, you're out of luck." And
I don't know. Yeah, we don't know how he got it. We don't know how he got it, but apparently, yes, that's the name of the demon, and his sword is Dreknayan. The sword is known as Dreknayan. So Mark, you agreed with me last time. You said that you came over to my side that the Custodes are the best. So much better than the Space Marines.
They are. They're so much better than the space. They're like Space Marines 3.0. Primaris are like 2.0. Nobody wants to play the Gen 1 Space Marines. Ugh.
You know, it's actually closer to the Spartans out of Halo, if you think about it, because the earlier Spartans, the earliest ones, I guess, well, I don't know what he made before the Custodes, but the earliest ones would have been the crappy, first ones he made and all that. But the second class ones, that was the big ones. That was Master Chief and all that. And then after that, they started getting mass produced and getting smaller and crappier until you ended up with the guy from Firefly, ended up being, all that.
Yep. And Custodes are an army of Master Chiefs.
Yes. Yeah. Well, even more. You know what I mean? But yeah. Those ones to me were, Kelly, you were talking about obscure factions and that sort of thing. That's what I love about the Horus Heresies. You're getting a look into all those obscure facets of the Empire that were never really talked about before. Custodes, the Silent Sisters, which I love reading about them too. Yeah. I like that combination of those two there. So yes, I'll be interested to see what you think of as you finish that story. Mark, I guess you're gonna check out that Prospero. There's two there, like Rich said. There's one told from the Thousand Suns side, and there's one told from the Space Wolf side. So
it's like the same story from two different sides or the same engagement.
Yeah.
Leaving Rock side versus Magnus' side.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That should be fun. I've already got them on my other tab here on Amazon, so I'll probably get them both on Audible.
And I would ask you as well, put on your radar the Emperor's Legion. That one is really, really good. I enjoyed that one a lot. That was real good. That was all about the Custodes, the Silent Sisters, but in the modern 40K era, when Gimmin comes back and they happen to be around at the time. That was really well done. What's that, Rich?
Was that Rich?
Yes, the post Cicatrix Maledictum, where the Eye of Terror Terror's opened and all that shit happens.
Yep. And so, Kelly, I'm very interested to see what you think of as you finish that one and as we continue on through that series.
That's right. And I kind of like the Speak Nerd and Enter book club. And I'm digging this. So
yeah, I like that too. So, all right, guys. Well, thank you very much. And we'll see you next time.
Peace out.
This concludes our Speak Nerd and Enter broadcast.